You always do this, turn the room into your spotlight and expect an audience. My sister sneered, fork clinking like a judge's gavel. You think she'll notice? She never notices me. Her laugh was small and sharp, the kind that finds the softest places and keeps scraping. I smiled because my hands were full of other things, a coffee gone cold, a suitcase half open under the bed, a life that felt suddenly like a house of mirrors. The house hummed with family habit, television murmurs, the fridge's tired breath, someone's playlist on repeat, and beneath it all a quiet I could taste, the parts of me they never learned to see. Hy everyone, my name is Layla Grant, I'm 28. And if you think family means safety, then you've never had someone slide a secret across the table like a used napkin. It wasn't fireworks or the kind of screaming that makes police come. It was a voice in the dark, a private message that arrived where it shouldn't have, meant for my mother, not me. Words folded into words, a casualness that felt like a hand closing around my throat. She's always been useless with money. I'm surprised she hasn't ruined herself yet. Maybe she thinks she deserves more than she owned. Don't worry, once she moves out, we'll sell the house. It's better for everyone. I read it twice. The third time, my stomach learned how to sink. Betrayal isn't often dramatic, it's domestic. It smells like laundry detergent and old coffee. It hides in group chats and the way someone avoids your gaze when they pass the salt. My sister's mockery slid against me, and on the inside, something unclipped. I lay awake that night and listened to the house breathe. Every creak was a sentence I hadn't been allowed to read. I recalled the small debts they joked about. Mom will handle it, we'll help you out, and how those offers evaporated the moment I needed them. I counted the favors I'd done for free, driving back for a lost phone, lending the kind of money that steadies a panic, staying silent when other truths would have combusted. Each memory stacked like plates ready to drop. In the morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen table and lit the private message like an accusation. The plan wasn't born from rage, it was born from the quiet way they had decided my life's value. I packed a bag, not in a hurry, but with a steadiness that surprised me, and for the first time in years I allowed myself not to ask permission. I left a note on the counter that said, simply, I'm not an accident you can fix. The engine turned over like a promise. The road ahead felt like a question with teeth. The tires hummed a low hymn against the highway, but my chest was louder. Each mile felt like it was pulling threads out of a sweater I'd worn too long. I drove without music, only the sound of air rushing past, as if silence itself was telling me to finally listen. The night before, I'd stared at that message until the screen dimmed. My sister's voice lived in every word, her smug certainty, her hunger to erase me. And my mother's silence, that was worse. No reply. No defense. Just space where love should have lived. That emptiness echoed louder than betrayal itself. I thought about the childhood nights when I'd pressed my face into a pillow, pretending I didn't hear her whisper through the walls, Mom, why does she always get more? My mother's tired laugh answering, because she asks. But asking came with bruises, ones invisible enough to pretend away. Now, with my suitcase rattling in the back seat, the memory twisted sharp. They had planned my erasure like spring cleaning. Sell the house. Cut me out. The kind of neat betrayal that leaves no evidence except the ruin of someone's trust. At a gas station off the interstate, I caught my reflection in the glass. Same dark eyes, same hair escaping from its knot. But something was missing, something they had taken and left hollow. I whispered to that reflection, not anymore. The plan wasn't fully formed yet, but the bones were there. They had counted on me leaving broken, quiet, ashamed. But shame only works if you stay still. What if instead of running from the wreckage, I let it burn behind me, and made sure they stood in the smoke? I slid my phone out, scrolled back through old emails, bank transfers, receipts. Proof stacked higher than their accusations ever could. Years of me paying bills, covering gaps, keeping secrets that could shatter reputations. My sister thought the private message was a dagger. She had no idea I was holding the whole arsenal. The engine roared again when I turned the key. This wasn't escape. This was prelude. And when I came back, they wouldn't see me coming, only the aftermath. The first night away, I booked a cheap room on the edge of town, peeling wallpaper, humming neon outside the window, the kind of place no one would bother to look for me. I didn't need comfort, I needed anonymity. The suitcase sat unopened at the foot of the bed, but my laptop glowed like an accomplice. Click by click, I began unearthing the history they'd conveniently forgotten. Old text threads where I'd Venmo'd my sister rent money after her emergency, messages where mom promised, "We'll pay you back as soon as your brother's stable." Promises that dissolved like sugar in water. I kept scrolling, each screenshot like a bead on a rosary of betrayal. The folder I built on my desktop grew fat, receipts. That word felt holy. Proof has a strange power. It silences gaslighting, turns whispers into verdicts. If they thought I was the weak one, they had miscalculated. My weakness had been silence. At 2 a.m., I shut the laptop and stared at the ceiling fan turning shadows in circles. Sleep wouldn't come, but resolve did. I could hear their voices in my head. "She's dramatic. She'll forgive us. She always comes back." Not this time. Forgiveness was a currency I'd gone bankrupt on. The next morning, I walked into a downtown coffee shop with brick walls and the smell of roasted beans clinging to everything. I ordered black coffee, sat by the window, and opened my notebook. Paper feels more final than screens. My pen moved fast, drafting a plan that would not just free me, it would leave them facing the ruins of their own lies. Step 1. Protect my accounts. I moved money, closed loopholes they might exploit. Step 2. Reclaim what was mine. The house wasn't just walls, it was my father's legacy, one they'd tried to erase me from. I had records, deeds, statements they didn't know I still held. Step 3. Exposure. My sister's perfect mask, her curated life, was fragile. I knew the cracks. By the time the coffee turned cold, I felt lighter, sharper, dangerous in a way I'd never allowed myself to be. For once, I wasn't their scapegoat. I was their reckoning. For once, I wasn't their scapegoat. I was their reckoning. I began with paperwork. Boring, legal, precise. There's a strange intimacy in ordering certified copies of deeds at midnight, in listening to the clerk's bored voice as if it were a drumbeat for something inevitable. The smell of toner at the copy shop felt like war paint. I stamped, signed, and then called the lawyer I'd used once when my father's medical bills had spiraled. He remembered me, remembered the quiet way I'd kept everything together, and he didn't sound surprised when I said, "I need to talk about ownership and hidden transfers." His questions were clinical, his tone implied I'd finally decided to stop being polite. While legal avenues warmed up, I fed the softer edges of the plan. Reputation can be a currency more valuable than cash. My sister had spun a life of weekend brunches and carefully filtered photos. The slightest misstep would look enormous under daylight. I reached out to an old colleague of hers, a woman who'd once trusted my sister with a business lead and ended up with nothing but excuses. The colleague's voice cracked when I told her what I knew. She'd thought it was incompetence, not malice. Together, we built a quiet dossier of missed promises, broken contracts, and the small, ugly patterns that add up to a person's true shape. Nights were for reading, contracts, account statements, email headers. Days were for small, surgical moves, changing passwords, filing notices, making the kind of calls that feel like turning a key in a lock. I visited the House Records office and sat in that sunlit municipal room surrounded by people who thought I was another woman trying to fix her mess. I wasn't fixing anything. I was cataloging. There was a cruelty in my calm that surprised even me. I mailed a single, precise letter to my mother, not accusatory, only factual. Copies of receipts. Dates. Quiet questions. The kind of letter you can't easily laugh off. I left a copy where my sister would find it, folded into the pages of a book she loved, her favorite novel on the coffee table. They had expected tears. Instead, the house smelled like coffee and old paper, and something heavier, anticipation, settled in the rooms they'd thought they owned. The silence that followed my letter was deafening. No frantic calls. No apologies. Just nothing. And that nothing told me everything. They were regrouping, whispering behind curtains, deciding how best to paint me as the villain. On the third morning, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister, "You've lost it. Stop embarrassing yourself." No explanation. No denial. Just dismissal. I stared at her words until they blurred, the same tone she'd used our whole lives, minimizing, mocking, reshaping reality so I always appeared smaller. But I wasn't smaller anymore. I was holding the receipts, literally. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need their acknowledgement to prove I'd been wronged. Proof was oxygen, their silence was gasoline. That evening, I returned to the house I'd once called home. I parked across the street, windows rolled down, letting the cool air slip in. Through the living room window, I saw them, my mother and sister, faces pale in the glow of their phones, whispers sharp, like blades grinding together. They looked unsettled, and that sight alone lit a calm fire in me. I didn't knock. I didn't announce myself. I simply walked up the porch steps, unlocked the door with the spare key they'd forgotten I had, and entered like I still belonged. Because I did. The room froze. My mother's lips parted, trembling around words that wouldn't form. My sister's eyes darted to her phone like it was a shield. "I'm not here for a fight," I said evenly, placing a thick manila envelope on the table between us. "I'm here for clarity." Inside were copies of everything: bank transfers, rent payments, the private message she'd accidentally sent. Their secrets, their schemes, all lined up like a confession they hadn't meant to give. My mother's hand shook as she reached for the envelope, but I stopped her. "No," I whispered. "This isn't for you to read. It's for you to sit with. Every page is a mirror." For once, they had no script, no quick laugh, no deflection. Just silence, and the sound of their own lies pressing in. And in that silence, I felt the balance shift. The silence stretched long enough to feel like punishment. My sister's face twitched between rage and fear, her bravado cracking at the edges. She finally hissed, "You think you're clever? You think waving papers around makes you important?" Her laugh was brittle, like glass about to snap. I didn't answer. I let the quiet thicken, let her own words hang in the air. Because the truth wasn't in what I said, it was in the evidence she couldn't refute. My mother cleared her throat, her voice fragile. "Layla, this isn't what you think. Families help each other, you know that. We were only trying to balance things." Balance. My voice was calm, colder than I expected. "I paid your debts. I covered her rent. I held everything together while you pretended I was the problem. And then you decided I was disposable. That's not balance, it's theft dressed up as love." Her lips trembled, but she didn't deny it. She couldn't. I slid another paper from the envelope, the deed transfer they tried to push through without my consent. My sister flinched when she saw it, color draining from her cheeks. "You underestimated me," I said, softer now. "You thought I'd crumble, like always. But this time, I'm not asking for explanations. I'm giving notice." I stood, my chair scraping against the wooden floor, the sound sharp enough to make them both flinch. "The house, the accounts, the secrets, I've already secured everything. You can't touch what isn't yours." My sister shot up, fury replacing fear. "You won't get away with this. You'll regret it." I turned to the door, hand resting on the knob. "No," I said without looking back. "The only thing I regret is letting it take me this long." When the door shut behind me, their muffled voices rose into chaos, accusations, panic, the unraveling of their alliance. For the first time, I wasn't part of their storm. I was the eye of it, calm, steady, and already moving forward. The night air met me like freedom. And with every step toward my car, I felt the weight of years fall away. By the next morning, word was spreading. Not from me, I hadn't uttered a syllable, but from them. My phone buzzed with half-truths leaking through cousins, neighbors, even an old family friend. "Your sister says you forged documents. Your mom claims you're unstable." Their panic had turned into a desperate smear campaign. But lies crumble quickly when receipts exist. I had already sent copies of my records, calmly, quietly, to the right people: the family lawyer, a few trusted relatives, even my aunt who'd always suspected favoritism but never had proof. Their voices carried more weight than my protests ever could. At work, my phone kept vibrating. My sister tried calling 14 times. I let each one die in silence. I knew what she wanted: to scream, to threaten, to twist my calm into weakness. But I wasn't playing her script anymore. That evening, I sat at the same coffee shop where I'd drafted my plan. The brick walls felt familiar now, like witnesses. I sipped slowly, scrolling through the news on my laptop, when a headline flashed in a small community paper: "Local family facing dispute over property transfer." My breath caught. They hadn't even waited to fight behind closed doors. Their desperation had spilled into public record. I closed the laptop, a strange warmth settling in my chest. This wasn't about revenge in the way they'd expected. I hadn't screamed, hadn't slammed doors, hadn't thrown accusations across dinner tables. All I'd done was shine a light. And the truth was loud enough to do the rest. Walking back to my car, the autumn wind brushed cold against my cheeks, sharp but clean. I thought of my sister's message, the casual cruelty, the assumption that I'd never notice. She'd built her life on the belief I would always stay silent. But silence had transformed. Now, it was my weapon. I slid into the driver's seat, staring at the road that once meant escape. Tonight, it felt like return. My phone lit up with one final text from her, "We need to talk." I didn't reply. Some conversations don't deserve answers, only consequences. The following week, I returned, not to the house, but to the lawyer's office. The air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. My file lay open on the desk, every page stamped, notarized, undeniable. Across from me, the lawyer leaned back with the quiet certainty of someone who had seen families unravel 100 times before. "It's airtight," he said. "They can't touch your share. In fact, with what you've documented, you could claim even more if you wanted." I nodded, but my chest was calm, not hungry. I didn't need more. I just needed enough. Enough to reclaim my name, my footing, my silence on my own terms. That evening, I drove past the house. The lights were on, curtains drawn tight, as though they could hide from the echo of their own actions. I didn't stop. I didn't knock. I only slowed long enough to notice the for sale sign planted in the lawn. My sister had underestimated how fast the world can close in when truth finally breaks surface. At home, in my small apartment with its cracked tiles and second-hand furniture, I brewed tea and let the steam curl into the quiet. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine, untainted, unclaimed by anyone else's hands. For the first time in years, I felt the ground under me solid and honest. I thought of the private message, how casually it had been sent, how carelessly my name had been carved into their plans. That single mistake had become my liberation. Sometimes betrayal doesn't destroy you. It rebuilds you with sharper edges, with boundaries that hum like electricity. My sister never got the confrontation she wanted. My mother never got the chance to smooth things over with half-truths and tears. What they got instead was silence. My silence, chosen and firm, the kind that speaks louder than any fight. And me? I got something better than revenge. I got clarity. I got distance. I got the kind of peace that comes not from winning, but from finally refusing to play. The chapter closed without fanfare, without spectacle. Only quiet justice.